Speaker, and today I rise to contribute to the Terrorism, Community Protection and Control of Weapons Amendment Bill 2024. And I was disappointed that I didn't get to speak on it in the last sitting week, but I'm pleased that it's come back. It's come back with the amendments from the Legislative Council, and they've delivered two amendments back to this place, namely an amendment to create longer-term designated areas under the Control of Weapons Act, and of course an amendment to reclassify machetes as prohibited weapons under the Act. Of course, when Victoria Police are designating areas, they will only be as large as is reasonably necessary to respond to the threat of violence or disorder, and it can only be for a maximum of 6 months of that time, and it will be declared as it will be as reasonably necessary. Of course, it'll be done with transparency, being met through publication of the sites and timeframes on the Government Gazette and also on the Victoria Police website. It'll be at sites like train stations, shopping centres, and of course under these reforms will be unable to be declared for longer periods of time. Of course, we see during peak times, such as the school holidays and over the summer months, the risk of weapon-related violence increases, and I know we've seen that in my particular electorate, and I'll come to that very shortly. The amendment gives the VicPol more flexibility so they can be present for longer in the areas where police intelligence tells us that there is an increased risk of violence. And we also know that giving police these search powers, I can't get rid of this fly, anyway, search powers has a different deterrent effect for people considering carrying weapons with them. So we know that it will stop some people just with the stop and search powers or the threat of stop and search powers at certain locations, in particular, as I say, shopping centres. I want to give a shout out to VicPol right across the state for the great work that they do, and I congratulate them on voting up their new EBA, and it's well deserved. But I want to give a big shout out to the VicPol members in my electorate at Melton under the leadership of Lisa Prentice-Evans, and of course Lisa's been in the city working for a few months and I think now working out in the northern area, but we'll come back to Melton. But Pat Catoni, who's been running the place out at Melton for a few months and doing a fantastic job, and they're always very responsive to all the issues that I've raised that's come through my office and that I've raised directly with the local members. I've spoken previously about the banning of machetes, and it was only 6 months ago that I spoke in the chamber about a fatal incident at the Woodgrove Shopping Centre in Melton, and it did result in the death of a young man, a 16-year-old youth. Unfortunately, it was a stabbing, but it wasn't with a machete, it was with a knife. But again, such a tragic event has destroyed two families, and that is the offender and his family, and of course the youth that was deceased as an outcome of this incident. So we've had a number of events out my way in Melton, or families being affected by knife attacks and machete attacks right through that western corridor. There was another young man attacked in Melton just before Christmas, and he was stabbed to death in the driveway of a residential apartment block. He was chased down by a gang of youths and stabbed in this driveway, and I believe the police have apprehended someone for that stabbing. And the member for Narre Warren North referred to it earlier in her contribution, and that was that there were two young brothers in their 21 in their low 20s, the other one was mid-20, were both stabbed to death 6 months apart, and the family had to deal with that. Really tragic outcomes, and the father of those two young boys was in Parliament only a few weeks ago when the African Youth Initiative played the movie of Reclaim Voices, and that movie, the theme around that movie was giving a perspective from the African youth perspective in regard to how they're treated within the community, how isolated some of them are, and how some of them did turn to crime. But the father, Antipas, who was there, and I've met with Antipas on a number of occasions, came in to watch the movie, but also to express his issues and concerns around youth crime, and in particular knife crime. And I thank him for it. But there was a fifth young fellow from Staunton College, which is one of the secondary schools in Melton, that was stabbed to death in a bus stop in Sunshine. And I think he was only 15 at the time. And again, it was a gang of youths that attacked him at that bus stop. And unfortunately, he lost his life. Look, I've previously spoken about, supermarket restrictions, banning the stocking and stocking of knives and the sale of knives. I know at the Woodgrove Shopping Centre, I think the Woolworths store, after the event at Woodgrove, where the young man was stabbed last year, stopped stocking and selling of knives. They didn't sell machetes, but they certainly did sell knives. So by declaring machetes as a prohibited weapon, it moves them into the highest restricted weapon category in Victoria. And if you're found in possession of a machete after this amendment is made, you'll be charged with a serious criminal offence, which will be punishable by 2 years jail or a fine of over $47,000. And if you're found with a machete before this becomes law, you are committing an offence anyway, and if you do not have a lawful reason for doing so. I've heard that some farmers may use machetes, some hobbyists may use machetes. There will be a process of exemption, and they can apply through that process. But again, I would have thought there's an alternative to a machete to be used around a farm or for whatever hobbyist you may use a machete for. But again, there is an exemption process that they could apply to. I have spoken about this before when I've raised this issue of machetes. It might have been in a member's statement of mine in the past, and as a previous role that I had as a paramedic, I've witnessed the damage of knife attack and machete attack. Machetes are a chopping machine, let me tell you. And if you've ever seen a human body being chopped up by a machete, it's not a nice view. And to try and patch a human body up that's been chopped up by a machete, it's not an easy job, let me tell you. And, when you use a machete into soft tissue, you picture, if you can picture just chopping into a piece of meat that you might put on the barbecue, that's similar to what would happen with a human body. If a machete hits a skull, it can split a skull like if you were splitting a watermelon. It is tragic. It is absolutely tragic. And if you strike blood vessels, well, obviously, depending on the blood vessel you strike, clearly someone could bleed out. If you strike nerves, it may be repaired, but you probably never get the use of that limb, full use of that limb ever again. As I say, these weapons do serious damage. And look, I haven't been on the road as a paramedic since 1995, and I'm talking back in my days, back through the 80s and 90s, where machetes were used, and in particular in areas like Sunshine and St Albans, where I worked on the road. They were a weapon of choice. So this is not new. This is not new. So, but they are very dangerous in the hands of people. One of the things that we're not concentrating on here in the debate, and that is we can remove machetes from or ban machetes, and we can remove edged knives from shops. But one thing that I think that we've also got to concentrate on, and that is the mindset of our youth about changing their culture of why they think they need to carry a knife. And we need to work a lot on that. And that comes back to the family doing a lot of work, the community doing a lot of work. There's a lot of good community groups that are out there at the moment. There's a lot of programs. We need to educate and inform our youth that they don't need to resort to carrying knives. And even in banning machetes, will they still have a mindset to go for something else in lieu of a machete? Do they make their own type of weapon that can still do the same type of damage? And I hope not. And I think that's one area that I'd like to see us concentrate on also in supporting the banning of these weapons. And I commend these amendments. to this House.